Hey, what's going on everyone? Greg here, and Apple has finally fixed the MacBook lineup. Since 2016, with the introduction of the new MacBook Pros, it seems that we have been plagued by numerous issues and problems surrounding Apple's laptop lineup, whether that was the high starting prices, the underpowered 12-inch MacBook, neglect to update the MacBook Air, or the divisive and downright unreliable butterfly keyboard. And for the first time in a long time now, in 2020, the MacBook lineup finally makes sense, but there's also more options than ever, with options ranging from a thin and light $999 MacBook Air to maxing out an 8-core 16-inch laptop with 8GB of dedicated video memory and 64GB of RAM for $6,099. Well, I'm going to try and do my best to explain the entire lineup to you and go over the pros and cons of all these different laptops in Apple's lineup, and honestly, the choice may not be as clear as you think. So let's start with the lowest cost model and what will probably end up being the most popular MacBook for most people, the MacBook Air. The MacBook Air is certainly aimed at the entry level of the market. It starts at $999 for a dual-core i3 processor, which is capable enough for most daily tasks that the average person would do on a laptop. Think of things like web browsing, social media, listening to music, watching videos, browsing your photos, FaceTime or video conferencing calls, word processing, Excel spreadsheets, and of course PowerPoint or Keynote presentations. The MacBook Air is also the most portable in the lineup, weighing in at just 2.8 pounds compared to the 13-inch MacBook Pro at 3.1 pounds and the 16-inch MacBook Pro at 4.5 pounds. It's the one that will take up less weight in your bag, and while strangely enough, the thickest part of the MacBook Air is slightly thicker than the MacBook Pro, the overall thickness is thinner near the middle and bottom, making it easier to pick up thanks to the tapered edge design. This makes the MacBook Air an ideal laptop for casual users, students, or business execs who don't need raw processing power, but who need to type all day on a reliable keyboard. Thankfully, now every single MacBook in this lineup now has the new Magic Keyboard, which offers increased 1mm of travel and better reliability over the old 2015 to 2019 butterfly keyboards that used to be in the MacBook lineup. Battery life is also an important factor to consider, and from my experience, the MacBook Air also offers the best battery life. Apple rates the battery life to be 11 hours of playing offline video straight, which isn't a realistic battery test, and battery life can range widely depending on what you're doing on your laptop. But in my mixed usage, I average around 10 hours of battery life on the MacBook Air. Now, I do want to go back to the conversation of processing power, because this entry-level $999 MacBook Air does come with a dual-core i3 processor. However, there are some other processor options that might be suitable for most people. For example, you can upgrade the MacBook Air to be a much more capable machine with options for a quad-core i5 processor for an additional $100 upgrade, and a quad-core i7 processor for an additional $250 upgrade. Now, for most people watching this video, I actually think it would be beneficial to you to upgrade to that quad-core i5 processor, which is only an additional $100, as it gives just enough of a power boost to that entry-level MacBook Air to make it a more capable machine of dipping into some more powerful tasks. This means you can start experimenting and dabbling in areas like video editing, sound production, and development. And the i5 and i7 models also have better graphics, which granted, you shouldn't buy a MacBook Air for gaming, but you can play some older games on low settings by opting for the i5 upgrade, or you can play some lighter titles in Apple Arcade. However, my main point stands that the MacBook Air is the better laptop for most people, especially people who value portability and battery life above all else. And let's be honest, it doesn't have the Pro name for a reason. And for people watching this video and are wondering, well, should I get a maxed out MacBook Air with a quad-core i7 processor, or should I upgrade to the 13-inch MacBook Pro for only $50 more when you choose that i7 option? Well, I have some answers for you. Now, at first glance, you might think that there's not much of a difference between the MacBook Air and the 2020 entry-level MacBook Pro. For example, if you just take a look at Geekbench benchmark scores, you can see that single-core performance on the Air actually beats out the entry-level Pro. So is Apple pulling a fast one on us, and is the i7 Air with a quad-core processor actually faster than the entry-level 13-inch MacBook Pro with its 8th generation processor? No. So I know I'm biased towards video editing, but it's one of the real-world power measurements that I can personally measure. So for this video export, we have all the MacBooks exporting a simple 10-minute 4K video file to ProRes. And as we run the export benchmark, we can obviously see that the 16-inch MacBook Pro is the clear winner here, exporting this 10-minute 4K video file in just 4 minutes and 32 seconds. The second place winner is the $1,799 MacBook Pro with 4 Thunderbolt 3 USB-C ports with the new 10th generation Intel quad-core i5 processor. It finishes the export at 8 minutes and 6 seconds. Now the big question remains, how will the entry-level MacBook Pro go off against the fully loaded i7 MacBook Air? Well, actually, pretty well. That entry-level MacBook Pro, even with the older 8th generation processor, finishes the export at 8 minutes and 48 seconds. Just a 42-second difference between that and the more expensive MacBook Pro. Now, surely the MacBook Air is going to finish in just a few seconds, right? Nope. The MacBook Air is actually still way behind. And it takes a full 15 minutes and 47 seconds to finish exporting this 4K video, a whole 7 minutes longer than the entry-level MacBook Pro. Okay, I'm kind of getting back here for a quick shot because I just want to do some commentary on this. Obviously, the camera angle is not ideal. I'm kind of crouching down a little bit. And then I also have the boom microphone I usually use for my overhead setup. It kind of looks like a game show host microphone at this point. So I'm sure this is not going to look good on camera. Maybe I don't even use this footage. Anyway, the 16-inch MacBook Pro, I don't think anyone's surprised here. It exported the fastest, it should. It's the most expensive, it's the biggest one, has the better thermals, better CPU, and the better graphics. No one else is surprised by the MacBook Air results either. It is the slowest in the lineup, it is not meant for video editing, and even with this i7 version, it took a long time to export that 4K video. Now, the really interesting one is, of course, these two, because they are pretty close in comparison for this simple 10-minute 4K video export. Now, yes, the $1,799 one finished faster than the entry-level model, but this entry-level model MacBook Pro always gets a bad rap because people look at the processor in it, they see that it is an 8th generation processor, and they immediately go, well, the new one has a 10th generation processor. It must be so much better than the entry-level model. How could Apple not put a 10th generation processor inside of this machine? Well, this was a very simple 4K video export test. It was done to ProRes. There was no advanced color grading on any of these clips, no advanced graphics. There's something else in this that maybe could have given an edge to this machine over here. But you just have to look at these close results, and depending on your workflows, this 13-inch MacBook Pro, this entry-level model, might end up being the better value, even though this on paper looks like it's going to be much more powerful. This is probably awkward to stare at as I was filming this entire thing, but I think this video is awkward enough. This is probably one of the most awkward setups I've done, and I'm just gonna slowly scuttle away off camera before Travis makes fun of me. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And good night. Now on top of that, there's also some other differences from the Air besides processing power. All of the MacBook Pros have better displays than the MacBook Air. They can reproduce a wider range of colors thanks to their expanded P3 wide color gamut, which should be beneficial for people that need accurate color representation like photo or video editors. The display can also get 100 nits brighter than the MacBook Air at 500 nits of peak brightness compared to the MacBook Air, which can get 400 nits. All the MacBook Pros also have the Touch Bar, a small extra display that replaces the function key row and can be interacted with to not only change the brightness and the volume sliders, but also offer customized shortcuts and apps and different ways to control commonly used tools in a lot of your favorite applications. However, both the MacBook Air and the entry-level MacBook Pro just have 2 Thunderbolt 3 USB-C ports on the same side of the device. which could end up being a big bottleneck for people. Also, the 4-port model isn't just an upgrade in slight processing power and ports, it also comes standard with 512 gigabytes of SSD storage and 16 gigabytes of RAM. That's compared to the 256 gigabytes of storage and 8 gigabytes of RAM found on the entry-level MacBook Air and the entry-level MacBook Pro. The entry-level MacBook Pro also has worse speakers than the 4-port model, not having subwoofers in the speakers themselves. However, this $1,799 model of the MacBook Pro isn't better in all respects. The 4-port model had the worst battery life of every model I've tested, averaging around 5 to 6 hours of battery life with mixed usage on a single charge. That's worse than the entry-level MacBook Pro, worse than the MacBook Air, and worse than the 16-inch MacBook Pro. That's not to say the $1,799 model is invalidated because of this. This is the most powerful compact MacBook that Apple offers, and for some people, that's going to be the only thing that matters, and it's going to be the winning argument above all else. Now, if size isn't an issue, or you just want the biggest display possible, you should really check out the 16-inch MacBook Pro. Now, this is by far the biggest MacBook in the lineup, with the biggest footprint, thickness, and weight, with it weighing in at 4.5 pounds. But that increased weight and thickness does come with significant gains. First of all, a lot of that added weight is thanks to the bigger battery inside of the 16-inch MacBook Pro, which comes in at a 100 watt-hour battery. That is the biggest battery you could possibly pack into a consumer laptop, with you still being able to take it on a plane thanks to some flight regulation. So literally, it's almost impossible to complain about the battery life in the 16-inch, because technically this is the best they could get it, you know, without switching over to like ARM processors or something like that. Overall, the battery life is pretty similar to the MacBook Air, making the less portable 16-inch option a lot better choice than the 13-inch MacBook Pro if you're going to be away from a power socket for long periods of time. The increased thickness and weight is also attributed to a better thermal design, something the 13-inch MacBook Pro is still lacking, and better CPUs, GPUs combined with that better thermal design gives us much better performance. As we saw with our video exporting test, this laptop exported twice as fast as the $1,799 13-inch model. However, this MacBook Pro is pretty maxed out. It has the 8-core i9 processor, an AMD Radeon Pro 5500M. This model can also be configured with the highest storage and RAM options, allowing you to get up to 8 terabytes of internal solid-state storage and up to 64 gigabytes of RAM. This model is also the only MacBook Pro on the table that comes with a dedicated graphics card. For this test, I'm using the highest end AMD Radeon Pro 5500M in the Heaven benchmark test. And you can see just how much of a performance increase you're getting over every other MacBook in this lineup. It's a night and day difference, and it's not even a completely fair comparison. As I ran this benchmark on the 16-inch MacBook Pro at a higher resolution, so if I ran this at the same resolution as the 13-inch models, we would actually get a higher overall score. And if you're willing to load Windows onto the 16-inch MacBook Pro via Boot Camp, you can actually get some pretty respectable performance and use the MacBook Pro as a side laptop for some gaming. Furthermore, the 16-inch screen just gives you even more area to have multiple windows open and gives you a beautiful 16-inch display to watch content on, which makes it the ultimate entertainment MacBook. Furthermore, the 16-inch also has the best quality speakers of any of the other MacBooks in the lineup, offering the best sounding speakers I've heard in a laptop, period. The 16-inch also has the best microphones, with Apple only calling the 16-inch MacBook Pro's inbuilt microphones studio quality. This was the microphone that Michael Fisher, Mr. Mobile himself, used to record an episode of our podcast GadgetCast with. So if you want to know how this 16-inch MacBook Pro sounds, I will leave a link to that episode down in the description below. Now, it's not all praise for the 16-inch model, because it does come with one significant weakness that is going to impact most consumers, and that is the price. It is by far the most expensive MacBook in the lineup, with a starting cost of $2,399 for the 6-core model. But if you didn't bat an eye at that price and you just need the most powerful laptop possible for video editing, photo editing, development, and yeah, maybe even playing some games in Windows Boot Camp, the 16-inch MacBook Pro is really great. Now, all in all, this isn't the typical type of video where we take 4 laptops and, put a versus symbol next to each one of them and then declare a winner at the end of the video, because honestly, there's really no wrong choice here. It just depends on what kind of laptop you need. So if you watched this video and came away with the takeaway that you want the thinnest, lightest MacBook for basic tasks with good battery life, well, obviously the MacBook Air is for you. Or if you just need a more powerful laptop to get your day done and close enough performance to the 4-port model, the entry-level 13-inch is for you. Or if you want a little more power, 4 ports, and some upgrades on the speakers and microphones, the 4-port 13-inch MacBook Pro is for you. And if you want the biggest, most powerful MacBook Pro possible for video editing, photo editing, development, sound production, gaming, whatever, or maybe you just want the biggest display possible, well, obviously the 16-inch MacBook Pro is for you. And basically, that is the 2020 MacBook lineup explained. Hopefully this video helped you out in deciding which MacBook is right for you. If it did, be sure to leave me a like. If you want to see more from my channel, make sure you're subscribed. Also, if you want to support the channel out in any way, maybe purchasing some of these MacBooks through an affiliate link, make sure you check out some of the links in the description. Also, be sure to let me know what you think of all of these MacBooks. Which one do you prefer? Are you a MacBook Air, a MacBook Pro, or a 16-inch MacBook Pro person? I kind of messed that part up, but who cares? I don't think anyone actually made it to the end of this video anyway. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Take care, everyone.